best advice I ever got in security. Go.
Always question the status quo. Don't be afraid to ask why. Are we still doing something in a particular way? One of the scariest things to hear in security is, that's the way we've always done it.
You're listening to SSO Series Podcast, recorded in front of a live audience.
Welcome, everybody, to the SSO Series Podcast. We are recording live in front of an audience in La Jolla, California, a beautiful place. It was just a hop, skip, and a jump for me to get down here. This was kind of great. I want all shows to be this close to where I live. It's fantastic. My name is David Spark. I'm the producer of the SSO Series. You can find us available at SSOseries.com. And sitting directly to my left is my guest co-host for today. It is Billy Norwood, the CISO of FF Enterprises. Let's hear it for Billy. Excited to be here, Billy?
I am. I'm excited. It's nice to be here in La Jolla, California, having 70-degree weather in the middle of December. It's almost Christmas now.
Yes. As all listeners on the East Coast suck on it. That's what I have to say. Hey, our sponsor for today is Praetorian, and they are your offensive security partner. And when I say offensive security, I don't mean that their body odor smells or anything like that. I mean, it's offensive as in they are working with you as a offensive security partner to improve your systems so you don't get nailed by a really obvious or not so obvious critical attack. More about Praetorian later in the show. All right, so we're recording this episode at the Planet Cyber Sec Conference in La Jolla, California. Huge thanks to Planet Cyber Sec. Let's hear it for them. And before I jump into this was something I was kind of concerned about. You know, one of the things we talk about a lot in cybersecurity, Billy, is diversity and trying to get people on board into cybersecurity. And I think a lot of signals push people away. And I'm going to give you a perfect example. This young woman I met last night, very eager to get into cybersecurity, okay? She's got 9 years of product management experience. She works in strategy, life cycle management for products. Everything she's done isn't directly in cyber, but all touch cyber. So she's been in, e-commerce and health and HR, and she's got an electrical and computer engineering background. But every time she goes look for jobs in cyber, they goes, oh, well, you need X number of years of cybersecurity experience. What would you be your recommendation to her on how to present herself of, no, you really do want me?
Well, first I'd explain to her that, she might be a little intimidated by how technical cybersecurity is. But as we've heard here today, and if you think about it, a lot of it is based on business goals. And she has that business knowledge and experience. She can really take that and, go with some basic courses.
But how would she sell it to a company before, if she wants to sell me, goes, well, we run cybersecurity experience. I kept saying yeah, but you need diversification. And I'm that.
Right. And I agree with that. My first hire at my current company wasn't as strong technically, but he had a strong background of working with other people in the business and working on risk. And I needed someone to really talk towards that.
Okay, so if you lean into that, that would be helpful. I'm actually going to bring in our guest right now, actually, to give an answer to this. This is our guest on the far left is the head of information security at the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. That includes the San Diego Zoo, among many other things. Anyways, big round of applause for Joshua Behrens. All right, Joshua. Or do you prefer Josh?
Josh is fine.
Josh is fine. All right. Josh, what would your advice be for this young woman beyond what we have advised so far?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, it's a people business, right? And being able to talk to the business and work within the business, I think that's really key. So I'd really sell that when I'm talking about working to get into security. I'd say, these are all of the things I've done. These are the parts of the business I've worked with. This is my background. And I think we have the room for that within cybersecurity. Absolutely. We don't need 20 years of coding experience.
I agree.
Is this the best use of my money?
All right. We all like to do more with less. We hear this all the time. So we're going to start free to low cost. I'm going to ask both of you, and I'll start with you, Billy, here. What are some free to low cost things organizations with small security teams can do that will have a big impact? This question came up in our recent AMA, Ask Me Anything, we hosted on the cybersecurity subreddit, for which you, Billy, you were a part of this. And I'm going to just quote a couple of people, not you, because we're going to hear from you now. But Jeff Moss, Senior Director of InfoSec at Encode, who works with a small team, suggested adopting a cybersecurity framework like NIST, CSF, and starting a risk register. And Jacob Jasser, security architect at Cisco, and several others suggested doing a business impact analysis. So if you've got a small team, Billy, and you need to make a big impact without a lot of spend, what's your recommendation?
All right. Just disclaimer, I was one of the business impact analysis pushers.
Okay, good.
My thoughts are, you need to know where the crown jewels are, what kind of controls are around them, and, how to protect them. One thing that I think is special about working at with a small team at a small company is you do have a little bit more time to spend with the executive team. So set up regular meetings with them so that you can understand where the business is going, where the crown jewels are, and then work as, I don't disagree with Jeff. Work on your risk register and align the controls to CSF as you go.
All right, we're going to come back with more. Josh, I want your answer to this. Low cost, big impact, and even free. Eager to hear.
Yeah, so I'm going to take a slightly different approach, right? There's so many different things we could do, but I really think cybersecurity awareness is key, right? So working with awareness first. Much of the material is available for free. The only cost regarding that is really the time and effort it is to put that together and reach out to your colleagues, reach out to the rest of the business, right? Make sure that as you build that brand of cybersecurity, that is key to really focus on security awareness.
So let me ask this question a different way. What money have you spent that has had the biggest impact for you in cyber, Billy?
That's a tough one. I actually bought a fairly cheap external surface management tool, and that helped me a lot to kind of understand what is exposed out on the internet, and it allowed me to find things that I didn't know that we had, that IT wasn't sure of, but marketing knew that we had out there. And that helps me kind of shore up those attack vectors into my environment.
By the way, I will speak, everyone who does one of these, uses any kind of awareness tool whatsoever, always a surprise. I am surprised of what's in my own house, let alone in a corporation. All right, Josh, what has been the best use of your money in cyber, that is?
So best use of my money in cyber, I'm going to actually go with EDR. The reason why I'm going to go with EDR is because that gives me the most amount of protection for the least amount of cost out of the gate. It gives me more visibility into my environment and enables protection on all of the endpoints. With a small team, I can leverage that to enhance and augment my team.
All right, now I'm going to go to the flip side, and hopefully you're not going to be IDing any of our vendors here or sponsors. What do you think is a giant waste of money? Especially, okay, let me say it this way. When you're starting out, let me just clarify. When you're starting out, you're green, you got a sub 3-person team. What's a waste of money?
GRC tools. They're a little bit much for kind of just starting off. It takes someone to manage it. I almost even include PAM in that. Even if those cyber insurance requires it, we bought it. We don't have enough people to manage it.
What about you, Josh?
Yeah, I'm going to second that and kind of say it's kind of any tool that you can do in a spreadsheet. Like when you're a very small company without a lot of money, if you can do it in a spreadsheet, don't buy the tool for it yet. Wait until later on we've got a bigger budget.
Yeah, but so many of these tools claim, are you working in spreadsheets? They're mocking your spreadsheet use.
They absolutely are, but I would say without naming a vendor, what's the difference with having a risk register in a spreadsheet versus having it in a massive tool that requires 15 people to support it?
If you're not paranoid yet, here's your chance.
All right, wasn't single sign-on supposed to solve all of our security woes, right? You remember this? You force strong MFA, you force logouts, dictating session length, all the great security hits. We love it. Yet, we're still seeing everything from phishing to session hijacking with SSO, that being single sign-on. So a lot of these issues come down to the failures in the handoff from SSO platforms and application providers. Now, according to a recent piece by Joe Sullivan, yes, that Joe Sullivan, formerly of Uber, and Atul Tushibagwali for CSO Online. So applications often don't enforce SSO restrictions. I'm going to start with you, Josh. Is this just growing pains for SSO, or does this hint at a persistent problem we're seeing?
Yeah, so I'm going to say growing pains for sure, but SSO's always been a balance of convenience and security. SSO at its best can simplify the user experience. It can add security that may have been lacking in an application or maybe even a platform or environment. However, I think we've all seen firsthand with a token that did not expire, or maybe it should have require MFA, or maybe even a user risk might have been heightened, right? Where some issue where it wasn't revoked and the user still had access to something they shouldn't have had.
Have you become any way disillusioned by SSO, Billy? Because most people, let me just throw this out before you jump in. We ask, like, what's the one thing you can do that'll have the biggest impact on your security? And by the way, one of the things we hear often is EDR, but the other one is like MFA, password management, SSO. Like, those are kind of the big hits that we hear. So, but have you been disillusioned at all by SSO?
I wouldn't say I've been disillusioned by it. I just think it shows that we can't just play set it and forget it, check a compliance box, because it's going to... Things are going to evolve. We're seeing all these attacks evolve where people are taking tokens in the middle of it, so we have to set like shorter and shorter session limits. Very similar to encryption, right? Over the past few years, NIST has shortened the time you should be keeping those keys around because it's easier for people to get access to them now than it used to be.
So actually, that's an interesting point. I think you might be right. I think a lot of people have a set it and forget it attitude towards SSO. Do you think that's why these are failing, Josh?
So I think that could absolutely be a major part of it. I think the other part, though, is the SSO tax, right? And also changes for those applications.
Explain the SSO tax.
So there's a fee with many applications that you have to pay in order to actually implement any kind of SSO, right? Like they say you have to spend this amount of money to get these services where they check the box. And
by the way, there is a website, and I don't know how updated it is because I knew it was some data, but there is, I think it's SSO.tax, which sort of outs the companies that do this.
Exactly, right? And that's a huge barrier to entry. And then I think one of the things that we're kind of seeing as you're tracking these applications is that you may have integrated at one point and now they've changed their model and now they're going to start charging a fee. And if the teams aren't aware of it, suddenly your SSO is broken.
By the way, all this negative news on SSO does not dissuade you from using SSO, right?
Yeah, absolutely not. Like I want to use SSO. I mean, again, there's a value there. We're making it easier for the end user, right? We're trying to make a good experience for them.
So what is the management, Billy? And I know you alluded to this earlier. So you don't have this set it and forget it attitude towards SSO. What is the management you should do and how regularly should you be doing it?
Right. And I think this is one of the parts that can cause some disillusionment is to audit of all the things that are connected, right? And, you know, we've heard here today, and you hear from a lot of people that they have 150, 450, 1,000 SaaS applications. So let's say they all have SSO. Where are you going to look for where's MFA? Do you have to buy a tool that audit it? Do you have to go work with the group that owns that tool that's SSO'd in to figure out, do you have the right settings? I would love to do this regularly, but a small team, as I mentioned earlier, but I think that's what we have to kind of figure out.
All right, actually, I'm going to close because you referenced it. This was a question I asked a while ago. I asked the security community, is there truly anything in security that is set it and forget it? The answer was no, but I'm interested to know what's the closest thing that comes to set it and forget it in security. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one. Mm-hmm. I'd say that maybe, since we talked about passwords, right? Usually that's gone a little bit longer because it kind of lasts as far as how fast we can crack them. But sometimes, you know, I think that 8 password being okay lasted for about a decade.
Okay. What do you think the closest to set and forget it? Assuming we know it's not, but what's the closest?
Yeah, I like the password policy one, right? Like, I mean, it's because you're basing it on standards. The standards don't change that often.
Who's our sponsor this week?
Our awesome sponsor is Praetorian. Remember I told you they were your offensive security partner. So let me tell you, before anyone goes any further, we're going to talk about Praetorian. So they help security teams go back on the offense and shift cyber programs from a reactive, assume breach mentality, which I know many have gone that route, to a prevention-first strategy. Praetorian's adversarial experts protect your business from evolving cyber threats by continuously emulating attackers to help you identify and mitigate your material risks before attackers have the opportunity to exploit them. So let Praetorian do it first so you know. So with Praetorian as your offensive security partner, you can actually stay several steps ahead of attackers and avoid the high costs of breaches. The best defense is a good offense. Now, for more, you got to go to their site, and I'm going to spell it to you. You're going to go to Praetorian.com, spelled Praetorian.com, Praetorian.com. Check it out.
It's time to play What's Worse?
All right, we're going to play What's Worse now. So for those of you who are not familiar with What's Worse, this is a risk management exercise, okay? I'm going to provide two awful scenarios. You will not like either one of them. No, you won't like them at all. But you got to pick one, and that's the way it works. You got to pick one to tell me which one is worse. Not the one that's better, hence the game is called What's Worse. I'm going to make you answer first, Billy, for the first one. Here we go. This comes from Tim, Information Security Director in Arizona, so that's as much as he's willing to reveal at this point. By the way, I want you to all listen along because I'm going to want your opinion after this. Okay, so it's an audit scenario. You have a large audit that could have serious consequences if you fail. Scenario number one, the IT leaders tell auditors what the auditors want to hear, even if it's entirely different from what the engineer's state is configured. The engineers are told they are not allowed to talk to auditors without a leader present. Not good, right, Billy? You would agree. Okay, well, wait for number two. Senior IT leaders notice the auditor is very young and make ageism jokes. They then encourage you to withhold information as the auditors are, quote, too young and dumb to know any better. They're just following a checklist. All right, let's hear it. Which one's worse?
I would definitely say number two. I mean, you really can't make ageist jokes, especially in California or anywhere these day and age. And
people get away with ageism, although on the flip side, actually, of that. But okay, so this is your argument is the ageism jokes? I think there's worse to this.
Because either way, you're lying.
Yeah, okay, well, either way you're lying, but which one's worse here? So it's number two because of the ageism stuff?
Insult to injury, you're lying to them, and you're being ageist.
Okay, well, yeah, that's okay. It's a double whammy. All right. Do you agree or disagree here, Josh?
Yeah, they're both horrible, but I agree, right? I mean, I think like having the ageism jokes and stuff, like that's not going to work.
It's not going to work. It's simply not going to work. Okay, let me ask the audience now. I'm going to go turn to the audience. By applause, the first situation is to just tell the auditors what they want to hear, and it's completely different from what they've got going on. Now, I should point out that the second scenario, they're not lying, they're just withholding information. So it's not a flat-out lie. Just not holding. I know there's a fine line between the two. So how many people think the first scenario where they really are flat out lying? By applause, how many people think that one's worse? All right, good number one. Number two, how many people think it's the ageism jokes and they're just withholding information from the auditors who wouldn't know better? Did you applaud for both of them? I think Ed. No, Ed. Oh, it was you. Okay, you didn't applaud. Oh wait, so hold it. Applaud again. Give me one more. So it's just you. Everyone's against you guys. Yeah, but everyone here wants to make...
But he's clapping the loudest.
No, Ed's clapping the loudest. Everyone's all fine with making ageism jokes, I think, in this room. No, it is, again, it's a what's worse scenario. All right, here we go. Second scenario. Thank you very much, Tim from Arizona. This one comes from one of our most prolific what's worse scenario submitters, and it's Dustin Sachs. And this one's quite humorous, all right? So here we go. What's worse? Dustin comes from the World Connect Corporation. Having your smart home device malfunction and play loud music in the middle of the night, waking up the entire neighborhood, or having it misinterpret your voice commands and start ordering random items online, leaving your house full of rubber ducks and disco balls. Which one's worse? Actually, I'm going to start with you, Josh. You got to answer this one first.
I'm going to go with the one with all the junk.
That's worse than waking up the neighbors?
I can explain.
Oh, yeah, this I want to know. Okay, I'm your neighbor. I've been woken up. What's this racket, Josh? What are you doing?
Oh, my smart home malfunctioned. I have no control over it.
You have no control. That's your weak excuse. Don't you work in security? Aren't you a tech guy?
It's just my smart home. It's not. I didn't manage it.
It's not that smart. I'll tell you that much. Where the HOA is going to vote you out is what's going to happen. All right, Billy, which one's worse of the two?
I will agree with him. I'd rather not have to deal with trying to get refunds of everything online through that. That would just be more of a pain to me than dealing with my neighbors.
Yeah, but what like customer service is Amazon is phenomenal, and they will be happy to refund.
Both of my neighbors have been remodeling their houses for the past 6 months to a year, so I'm fine with it. I might just do this for fun and blame it on my smart home.
Oh, that's a good idea. All right. All right, I'm going to throw it to the audience. All right, which one, by applause, how many people think waking up your neighbors in the middle of the night with your smart home malfunctioning is worse? By applause. What? 2, 3? 3 people. All right. By applause. Over ordering on Amazon and getting all the stuff you don't want. By applause. All right. All right. You guys finally redeemed yourself. Good job.
Should you ignore this security advice?
Would cybersecurity benefit from a little behavioral economics? Now, we talk all the time about not forgetting the human element in cybersecurity, but it's easy to forget that there's an entire discipline that studies why humans make irrational decisions, noted Kiwi Murphy on dark reading. Now, for example, how often have we seen the sunken cost fallacy see decision makers cling to a security roadmap that's no longer relevant because of a prior investment? So I will start with you, Billy. Can you give some other common irrational behavior in cybersecurity, and how do you make yourself aware of it and others and combat it?
I think I'll start with I feel like an easy one first is phishing, for instance. Users are used to they see an email come in quick. It looks like it's coming from the same address. They're kind of thinking, okay, this is fine. And I don't know if it's irrational. You could call it lazy. You could call it they're very, very busy and their mind's not on top of things. But they end up clicking on that, and that causes a big issue.
All right, that's a good one. What do you think? Rational behavior, Josh?
Yes, I mean, I'm really interested in the human dynamic, right, in the way these decisions are being made. But I think the key things to be cognizant of behaviors and put processes in place to avoid those downsides of maybe something that was done that way. So like a good example would be like with roadmaps or like a tendency to stay with a certain legacy solution because it's easy, right? Like maybe it's easy because you have a vendor relationship, or it's easy because that's the way procurement works. That can really lead to a huge problem. Also, I think one more way to kind of avoid that is periodically doing some sort of exercise where you're doing like a stoplight exercise, right? Like what's working, what's not working, what do we need to stop doing?
All right, let me ask actually the reference that came up, the security roadmap that's no longer relevant because of some prior investment. Have you suffered or watched others suffer from the sunken cost fallacy and think, oh, because we spent this, we have to go down this road? I mean, I got to feel everyone's felt that kind of pain. Have you been subject to it? Have you fallen prey to it? How'd you manage it?
Well, I mean, I think one of the other aspects of that a lot of security leaders can be accused of is chasing the next best tool.
Oh, sometimes so that's the flip of the other side of that coin. Yeah.
Right. So I think to tie both those things together, you've got to like keep your roadmap, let's say 5 years out, you keep the high goals. What are we doing for the business there? When you start getting into the ground level work and tooling, maybe you need to keep that around 2 years out and continually do tool rationalization projects, tool optimization projects. If you have that tool, are you maturing it, or is it the wrong tool completely and we need to get something new for a newer threat?
It's interesting. Another, Adam Glick actually was a CISO who mentioned what he'd love to know is how far am I off? Like I set my tools like this today, 6 months from now, how far am I off the optimum? Because it was optimum today, but 6 months from now is not. So I'm assuming you run into this, Josh, yes?
Yeah, well, I've definitely seen that. And I think the way that I've approached that is like working with vendors and treating them like they're an advisor, right? And doing health checks and doing things like that to make sure that we always are doing the right things, or that maybe a config hasn't changed in a way that it shouldn't, or that it does change the way it should because things have changed.
Actually, that's a really, really good advice. I mean, it sounds like, like even when you're setting up a purchase with a vendor, like let's have regular checks to look at our setup. Have you guys done that before?
Definitely do that. I make sure to make it a partnership. We've heard from people today talk about
all the time. Yeah.
Looking at smaller companies sometimes, not just the big players, and they will sit down with you, go over the roadmap, and take advice about that roadmap, and that's a great partnership.
Oh, We hear this all the time from CISOs about how much they love to work for startups because those startups are looking for early wins, and they will flip to make those sort of early wins happy. Josh, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, earlier today, there was a company that was mentioned where, I had said, hey, can you just add some tags to that? And within 7 days, the tags were there, right? I think working with a startup gives you a great opportunity to sort of adjust your plans and make sure that the solution works best for you and most of your colleagues as well, because you'll find that the things you're asking for are probably things your colleagues are asking for as well at other companies.
What's it going to take to get them motivated?
There are a lot of similarities between traditional first responders and cybersecurity incident response. Now, readiness is key for both, but Mark Stone with IBM Security Intelligence wondered if cybersecurity can truly operate at that first responder level. And we know what we're talking about. We've seen first responders react. First responders need to adapt to changing conditions. Just ask a firefighter about extinguishing an EV fire. Now, does the pace of cybersecurity threats allow room to create that discipline? Can you be truly a first responder in cyber? And if so, is this about doing better red teaming, or is there a bigger mindset challenge? What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, so I think that you can, right? But I think that there comes with a downside. I think there's a challenge, and I think we've all seen it, is like making time for yourself and self-care. And I think burnout, mental health, like those are all real. And I think we see that with first responders too. So I'm kind of like taking that tie-in of saying, as a first responder, like we've seen that. Like in many cases when we moved into this industry, we said, all right, we're paid to be paranoid, right? That's a huge shift. And you take that home with you.
What do you think, Billy?
I definitely agree with that. Again, small business ideas, right? Having a small team. It would be great if we could go out there and create a IR playbook for every one of these new threats that are coming out. And they're coming out so fast, it's really hard to do. We really need to change our mindset that we have to work in cooperation with everyone else. I know a lot of us are doing this, but not everyone is. But like, you need to, not everyone might be able to have the money or the industry to join a local ISAC. But we have a lot of peer networks out there, a lot of things we can join for free, see what we can take from others to help us create these. CISA is coming back with vulnerabilities remediation. But I mean, if we have more playbooks for some of these threats, that's something we could put together as a community to help some of the smaller businesses that don't have the time, because so much is coming out so fast.
So often this being readiness takes the form of tabletop exercises. And two things I hear about tabletop is, one, it's hard to get just to do one because you need so many leaders in a room, which just that task alone, forget about everything else, that task alone is difficult. And the number of times you can do it in a year, once even, is tough enough. Is there something else outside of tabletop exercises or mini tabletop, I don't know, but that can sort of improve this process if you can't do the grand version of it? What do you think, Billy?
I think there is. We're looking at this year doing technical tabletops with just my team and the infrastructure team rather than pulling in the execs for everything. I mean, full ransomware blowout, right? The entire executive team needs to know how we're doing communication strategies. What are the legal ramifications? There's a lot there. But for something like initial containing the threat, I think we can able to do something just with our teams that's a little bit smaller.
What about you, Josh? What can you do to sort of, I guess, iterate more often so you don't have to rely on this one giant tabletop with all the execs?
Yeah, so I agree with breaking them out and doing smaller ones with different teams. And I think especially like as you're going throughout the business and looking at like maybe even different operating companies or business units or, just areas of the business, doing separate ones and really focusing on their business needs too. So don't come to the business with, here's sort of my exercise we want to do, focusing on security. Let's look at what's key to them and let's walk through that.
And I mean, I got to imagine that just doing everything you're talking about, it requires prioritization over the daily firefighting that you're doing, or can the daily firefighting play into all this as well?
Definitely the daily firefighting could be, and it's lessons learned. It's making sure that we share that information from whoever was tackling that incident, shares it across the teams. That can be done, for like a weekly team stand up and just like, what did we learn this week? or it can be done something more specific around just holding a whole talk focused specifically on response.
So let me close this out and ask, what in all the things we talked about, either tabletops, the little mini things, working with other teams, like what have you in this sort of effort to be a better first responder for your cyber team has been most effective for you, Josh?
I think the most effective thing for me has really been having those relationships established with the business, right? So as the small tabletops or working with those business units, it's having those relationships, knowing who the people are and understanding that. That's really the most benefit that I get from the tabletops, knowing who to talk to and when and how to talk in their language.
Billy?
I agree with that. And I'm going to reiterate, understanding where those threats are coming from, listening to people across that board so you know what to look for sooner than later so you're not exposed, shorten that time.
It's time for the audience question speed round.
All right. I've got a bunch of questions in my hand, and actually we got a good amount of time. So questions from our audience, and let's get through as many of these as possible. Answer whatever you think you can answer. I like this one from Chris Ankarski of Blue Lava Community. That's part of Ziston. What's the worst cyber career advice you've received or heard? Either one of you jump in on this.
The worst advice I've actually heard has been to say no.
To say no to
the business. Say no, don't do that, don't use that thing.
So being the Department of No.
Being the Department of No. And I've heard that advice.
You have heard. Just tell them no, we can't do that.
Absolutely. That's the worst.
Who was that told you to do that? And you don't have to ID them. Just simply the position they were at.
The answer is no.
No. Oh. Billy, worst advice?
I had a guy that ran a data center and he helped us out with some of our security. This is back in the day. It was my first PCI audit years and years ago. And he's like, security by obscurity, man. They're not going to figure us out. We just hand them back what they need. And that kind of ties into our first audit conversation. But security by obscurity, it's too complex for them to figure it out.
There is some element, I think, of truth to that. Hold on, I'm going to double down on that because Mike Johnson, one of my other co-hosts, he would say, my goal is to make an attacker's job more difficult to essentially compromise me. Now, obscurity is a level of complication, but it is just a level, and it could be a very weak level. It could be like putting a tablecloth over it. So, yes, it is bad advice. Would you accept there's a veneer of good advice there?
A slight veneer, right? As long as you are really not obscured by the mess that you have created and can chase down troubles pretty easy and identify them.
Have you faced people who are pro security through obscurity, Josh?
Yeah, definitely faced it.
And how do you deal with it?
We move away from that.
All right. Here we go. All right. This one comes from Steve Weil of Point B. What language do you struggle to get into third-party contracts? And he was bringing this because he's a small organization and he's dealing with really big organizations, and he would like, given their situation, certain other language. But, these big companies have these huge lawyers and these just sort of boilerplate contracts, like it's either this or nothing kind of a thing. Have you, dealt with it? I know you both have sort of smaller teams. Have you dealt with this, and how do you manage it?
I'd say sometimes business continuity pieces for getting, for SaaS software. Mm-hmm. A lot of times that isn't quite thought through around where our data goes and how our data gets back, kind of the data aspects of business continuity. More so is like, if we see an SLA, people usually check that box and don't want to actually write a full addendum.
Good point. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, so my experience is we tend to use security riders, and we have those defined based on different types of businesses. But that being said, it's not always a very complex rider. So sometimes the rider may only be 5 things, right? It's kind of like what's key based on that relationship or that type of vendor. So maybe I really only care about breach notification. So that's going to be my clause.
All right. All right, this one comes from Ed Covert over at Bowhead Specialty. And he asks, outside of banning AI, how are you ensuring that AI doesn't introduce unnecessary risk within your organization? I'll start with you, Josh.
So we're just going to say no. No, of course we're not going to say no.
He said without outright banning.
Yeah. No, I think we need to embrace it. And I think really a lot of the policies we have in place already address it. I think we already have policies that say things like don't put sensitive information in certain places. Don't share private information here. Don't put that data there. So we're already covering that. I think it's the same approach with AI.
Well, shameless plug, I gave a talk on AI privacy and security at IAPP this year, but I kind of turned that presentation more inward towards our own company, and I first presented to the entire IT team. This is like some of the things AI can do for you, and these are a lot of the risks. And trying to get everyone in the IT team kind of up to speed. And now I'm actually working with our head of data who's kind of interviewing anywhere in the company how they may use AI. And we're going to do a dual presentation for the whole company on uses for AI, how this could help you, and then go on into the risks. Our goal is, again, not to say no, but to get everyone to understand the risks and establish IT as the go-to. So anytime you want to use AI, you come through us because we're obviously knowledgeable about it.
All right, good answer. All right. From Ethan Adu of Ember River, what's a type of entry-level candidate you want to hire that you haven't been able to hire? Has that come up?
This just has to do with budget, but I'm hoping to hire someone next year and getting someone with AppSec, right? Finding someone who's a developer who's moving into cybersecurity, because those guys can be pretty expensive for a small team, but getting someone on there and kind of training them up would be great.
That's a popular category. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, I don't think it's really a skill set thing for me. I mean, it's always just been budget. Like that's any company I've been in, that's where it comes out.
But there isn't but it's sort of a type of thing. Oh, if I had someone who had this skill and this skill, it'd be great to round out my team.
Yeah, I really haven't had that experience. I would say every time I've been hiring, I've had a lot of candidates to pick through, right? There's a lot of people out there looking to get into cyber. I don't think there's any challenge.
All right. Okay. This comes from Matt Coltharp over at Ziston, and he's going to be talking about the vulnerability program management. It's not vulnerability management, but like how you're building out the program to deal with remediation. Okay. So how are you improving IT and cyber relations with the vulnerability program management, the remediation? So what have you done to sort of improve that process? We're very much focusing on process, either one of you.
Oh, so earlier I'd said, that's the way we've always done it, right? And I think like vulnerability management is one of those things. I think there's been a big tradition of here's the vulnerabilities, go fix it. And what I've been trying to do is partner with IT and say, okay, well, here's some things that we can help you with, right? Not only just here's the path to do it, but hey, how can we help, right? Let's do this together and let's approach this in a better way so we can actually make progress on it instead of just having tickets passing back and forth between teams.
I agree with that. And one of the ways we're doing that is through prioritization. Is this thing exploitable? Is this thing, I talked about attack surface management. Is this stuff touching the external network? And then when it comes to internal things that aren't touching the network or anything like that, a lot of times we'll do some pen testing for them to help them categorize the ones that may be exploitable to see if we can actually exploit them. So we're just trying to lessen their workload because honestly, there's a lot out there. They keep coming up.
All right. Lastly, second to last, Laz at System wants to know, you've been following the Clorox situation. What the heck happened from what you understand? What do you understand that happened over there at Clorox? Josh?
I wouldn't say I necessarily understand, but I think there's a lot of risk with being a CISO. What I will say is it's interesting that the headline from Forbes was Clorox scapegoat cyber chief.
Yeah. Well, by the way, we haven't heard that often. We used to hear it. Long period of not hearing it. It's coming back like fashion. What do you think?
No, I agree. And it is something that we all really need to think about. There's talks all over the place about the SEC ruling and whether CISOs need D&O insurance and understanding on what level we're reporting. Where do we land in figuring out materiality? Obviously, that's something the General Counsel can. We aren't able to necessarily always be except for advised on any reporting up to the SEC or an annual filing. So it's scary. Maybe sometimes it is better to walk. And maybe that's, you hear a lot of talk about people like, we're half of us going to leave our jobs before 2025 as a CISO. But I don't think it's quite that scary, but it's definitely the next year or two is going to be very interesting.
All right. Very, very last question. This comes from Aluk Nandan of First Raise. Would you like a CISO gig at Clorox?
I think it's a great opportunity, to be honest. I think we always kind of say if there's a major incident, right, that's an opportunity. right? And I think that the program is probably going to really change quite a bit.
By the way, usually when something that bad happens, the pay for the next CISO is off the charts. Usually.
Yeah.
So that could be a plus as well.
Of course.
I would agree with that. You know, maybe it's not everyone, but if you like, Experian is one of the best examples. They went from getting hit for like several breaches to be having one of the most open cyber programs and notifications. This is kind of where we're at. What they put in their 10K is pretty great to look at. So I'm hoping that if I did take a job at Clorox, that it would move that way.
Well, awesome. That brings us to the very end of this very show. Huge round of applause for my guest, Billy Norwood over at FFM Enterprises. And also Joshua Barons over at the San Diego Zoo. I'm going to let you guys have the very last word. Also, huge round of applause for two other organizations. One, Planet CyberSec for putting this whole darn thing on. For those of you listening, Planet CyberSec and Richard Greenberg over here, they put on tons of great shows, mostly all in Southern California. Yes, Richard? Yes, all in Southern California. Just go to their website, planetcybersec.com. And huge round of applause for our sponsor, your offensive security partner, Praetorian. Let's hear it for Praetorian. All right, with the few seconds that we have left, do either of you have any last words? Yes, Billy?
Mentorship is important at any time of your career, both mentoring others and finding a mentor for yourself.
That is key, even at a CISO. Yes?
Although my team's not hiring, we are always hiring.
That is good. And it must be fun to work at the zoo, yes?
It is amazing.
It's got to be. All right, well, a huge thanks to our sponsor, Praetorian, Planet CyberSec, this entire audience. We greatly appreciate it. And we also, for the listening audience, we greatly appreciate you contributing and listening to the CISO Series podcast.
That wraps up another episode. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do. We have lots more shows on our website, CISOseries.com. Please join us on Fridays for our live shows, Super Cyber Friday, our virtual meetup, and Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review. This show thrives on your input. Go to the Participate menu on our site for plenty of ways to get involved, including recording a question or a comment for the show. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, contact David Spark directly at david@CISOseries.com. Thank you for listening to the CISO Series podcast.